Week 12 brought us a lot of chaos in the world of college football. You talk about the college football playoff rankings. Those have updated now and kind of shifted around. A lot of teams that were still in the mix are no longer in the mix. It's an exciting week 13 that we get now to be able to preview, being able to go down through the college football playoff rankings and breaking those down. We've got all of it here and much more on SEC Primetime Live here at SEC at the Voice of College Football. I'm Josh Mahler, joined by Andrew Miller and Tucker Harlan. Guys, it's going to be an exciting week 13 for some teams. I think overall the conference really isn't going to change too much, I don't think, because most of these games just seem like they're all against the FCS, basically another bye week. But nonetheless, the games that we're going to be talking about, we've got some top opponents going against each other. Some teams maybe on upset alert, and we'll talk about all of that and so much more. First, for everybody watching, make sure to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. It helps us keep on growing so much here. And then share it with a friend. If you share the stream, share it on social media. Do whatever you can to help us keep on growing here at SEC, at the Voice of College Football. Anyways, let's get into it, guys. First, starting off with the college football playoff rankings, which came out yesterday. The playoff picture now looks just a little bit different when we look at all of these teams and where they stand. You've got some teams, such as Oklahoma, being one of them that it really stands out, obviously, to me, as being one of the teams that gets in. Texas, not really in the picture anymore. I think there's a few other teams that we could probably bring up. But looking at the college football playoff here, I mean, you start to see very close to what it feels like it should be towards the end of the season as we're coming down to the last 2 weeks, and teams really just have to win out and close out and do what they've got to do on their side and just kind of go through the motions. But I mean, Tucker, when you look at the rankings, obviously we're all going to have our own opinions about how the rankings should have been. When you look at the rankings, what are some of the tweaks that you would make personally in the college football playoff rankings?
Yes, so there's several tweaks I would make in this. The committee is obviously very imperfect. They've made some decisions that are questionable. They do it every single week. They did it all of last year too, and they've done it every single time there's a college football playoff. The BCS model was a much less flawed system than what we got now in the college football playoff. But there's several that I have in this scenario because Ohio State is still number one. They're clinging to that win against Texas from September. And you look past that, you got the win at Illinois, and I guess Illinois is still ranked. But, I just don't feel like it is as impressive of a win as what Indiana and Texas A&M have been able to do. Indiana getting that win at Oregon, I for, basically a year and a half said, this Kurt Signetti guy, he radiates fake tough guy energy for a little while, but that's no longer the case. They beat Oregon out there. They've proven me wrong. But they still are not going to face all of the top teams in the Big Ten routinely. And none of the Big Ten teams do that just because you'll have like 3 or 4 games of Northwestern, Purdue, and Maryland in between every difficult game in that conference. I also slid Texas A&M ahead of Ohio State in my rankings. I just think that win at Notre Dame weighs a little bit more than a home win against Texas to begin the season. And, recency bias isn't really a factor here because that was early on in the season. And, hey, if the committee's opinion of Notre Dame is that valuable, then maybe you should be looking at that Texas A&M win at Notre Dame as, maybe a superior win to what to what Ohio State did against Texas at the beginning of the season. I kept Georgia where it is. I think that's pretty fair. They finished 7-1 in SEC play. You got a head-to-head win against Ole Miss. I put Ole Miss actually ahead of Texas Tech because I think Texas Tech, while they have been pretty dominant in the Big 12, I do think that's a league that overall is not quite as strong as we've seen in the past. Like the SEC and Big 12 were going at it with each other early in the season. Some of the lower tier teams in the SEC were victorious, mainly Mississippi State and Auburn against the middle of the pack of the Big 12. So, credit to what Texas Tech has been able to do, but that's the highest seed that I've got coming out of that conference. Keeping Oregon at 7, and then I'm keeping Oklahoma at 8. Slid Alabama and BYU ahead of Notre Dame. Not a fan of putting Notre Dame all that high. It's like if you schedule them, you get punished for doing it as a Power Four team now. So like scheduling Notre Dame essentially has as much worth as scheduling one of these high end group of five teams, like say a Memphis or a Tulane, as a Power Four school. You shouldn't do it now just because it'll cost you against them in the playoff race, and they're an independent. So there's not very many comparable opponents there. I actually slid BYU ahead of them too. I think BYU has been very impressive in the Big 12 for a lot of the season. And then Notre Dame and Vandy are the last two in my top 12. But that is, of course, not how the college football playoff works. You have to have the automatic qualifiers from the ACC and the group of five. ACC, I went with Georgia Tech to get it done in that league because here's the thing. People joked for a while about Diego Pavia kind of being Hugh Freeze's father. Well, guess what? Haynes King is very much Mario Cristobal's father. Beat him when he was at Texas A&M back in 2022. And, of course, you have the infamous 2023 game down there in Miami where Georgia Tech should have lost that game, but for whatever reason, Mario Cristobal decides to run the football instead of kneeling it out, and it was a costly mistake. And then last year, that was one of just two losses for Miami in the regular season. So, and Georgia Tech just keeps finding ways to win football games. I feel like they are still the team to beat in that conference. And then Group of Five, man, give me the North Texas Mean Green. I know Tulane is in there at 12 right now, but I largely base this off of record, but Drew Mestamaker is putting up some serious numbers and doing some pretty serious damage in the American Conference. So I think the winner or the representative of Group of Five has to come out of there because Boise State is down this year, and that typically means the Mountain West is not going to get a team in if Boise State is not doing well. And then I just don't look at the Sun Belt or Conference USA as producing anyone that's quality.
Yeah, I think for the most part, a lot of the movements that you might, I think even some of the ones that you made don't make a huge difference, but some of them that you made even make a difference in just hosting or not. So that's really big, especially for Notre Dame bumping them completely out. I think that's the hardest one for me to defend is Notre Dame because it feels like you're crediting them for a loss, and I've always hated the term a good loss or a bad loss. Every loss is bad. Every loss, there can be worse losses. I think if you end up getting, for example, Texas this past weekend, they had a worse loss than what many predicted, and if they would have had a closer game there, they may still be in the discussion. But because they have a worse loss, then they're not. I don't like the good loss look on any of it. But Andrew, what are some of the things that you disagree with the committee?
I don't necessarily disagree with a ton. I did have some movement in the bottom half. The top four I keep the same, and I totally hear Tucker's argument on Ohio State. The lack of big time wins certainly is hurting them. Look, the Texas win is solid. I know the Longhorns have not lived up to expectations, but it's a good win. Illinois is a good win. I just think Ohio State has looked so dominant this season. And look, maybe it's a product of the schedule. Totally a fair argument, but I think it's hard to not look at that team and think, man, that's the best team in the country. And for that reason, I don't have any problem putting them at number one. And like I said, I agree with the rest of the top four. My first week, I would move Ole Miss up to number five. I think the overall body of work is slightly better than what you have from Texas Tech. But I would still keep the Red Raiders ahead of Oregon. Sooners in at number eight. I think I've got Alabama up at nine. I understand the loss to Florida State and just taking the loss to Oklahoma. I feel like that's a little bit of maybe an overreaction to just what you most recently saw. Obviously, it makes sense to have OU jump ahead of them because of the head-to-head. But I still think the number of wins they have against really solid teams, the Florida State loss is bad. I understand you can't just erase that, even though it was week one. I think the overall body of work justifies still having them higher. I think I'm making a change here on the fly because I know I sent you mine in, but I honestly keep forgetting about the whole Notre Dame versus Miami dynamic. That is so odd because I think everyone would very clearly say, if you were asked just who's the better football team, pretty much everybody would say Notre Dame. The reality is Miami beat them, and that result does have to matter. So uh, I don't love the way the Canes have played over the course of the season, and I think Notre Dame has some better results since. But look, neither of Miami's losses are necessarily bad. They're not great losses, but they're not to bad teams. And they have a win over Notre Dame. So I think I would still have the U up at number 9, which this is how I would do it. I don't know that this is what the committee's going to do. I think you will definitely, obviously, we see it in the rankings now, but I think going forward, it's going to be hard for Miami to jump them. But I would have the U in up at that spot. BYU at number 11, and then I guess number 12, Notre Dame, which would then kind of put you in a spot um, of, well, I would put Notre Dame at 11, BYU at 12, I guess is where I would land on that. Now, as for who would come in after that, because of course, as we mentioned, I do have an ACC team there in the top 12. I don't think Miami's winning the ACC. I don't think the path is there. They have to have a lot of things go right for them to get into the ACC title game. So ultimately, if Miami's getting in this thing, it's as an at-large, and I'm with Tucker. I think Georgia Tech, if they beat Pitt this weekend, they are in the ACC championship game, probably facing Virginia. It looks like the most likely opponent that they would get there. I would like their chances, but I would also like their chances even if SMU has kind of been up and down this season. I don't think Pitt's going to get in at this point, but I would take the Yellow Jackets, and I'm also with Tucker again. North Texas, again, the path is there. They should be able to win out and get into the American Conference Championship, and I think Tulane probably does still have a really solid path to get there. Whereas I think you look at Army, not Army, Navy probably going to take another loss potentially. So I like the path, but we've seen Tulane for as good as they've been. That defense has gotten lit up a couple times by a couple wide open offenses, and I think Texas Tech could hurt them. I know Tucker talked about Mestamaker, been very good. Eric Morris doing a great job with that team. So, yeah, I would have the Mean Green in as number 12, and I guess in my bracket would be going to Oxford to open this thing up, which there's obviously a lot of dynamic around that team, as we'll talk about later in the show. But, I don't think there's anything egregious with what the committee's done to this point, but I could definitely see some tweaks.
Yeah, I agree with what you just said. I don't think there's really anything egregious with the rankings the way that they came out. I think a lot of right now what you're seeing is just the committee saying who they think deserves to be in at the end of the season currently, rather than just who is better than who right now. Personally, I know this is probably one that might come with a little bit of bias, but I kind of question Oregon being ranked just one above Oklahoma, because you look at it right now, Oklahoma has 3 wins against the current top 25s. The top 25 that the committee says is top 25. How many does Oregon have on that current top 25? 0. In fact, they lost against the only other one that they've played against in this top 25. That's one of them that I kind of look at, and I feel like I'd probably shift around. I do agree with you guys. I think I would then also look at that Notre Dame. And this is kind of where it comes down to. I don't have a good argument against Notre Dame's 2 losses, right? And especially being one of them under Miami beating them. That's one of them that I really have a hard time battling. But I also do think that Notre Dame, like you said, Andrew, I think that Notre Dame is one of the top teams and should be a playoff team. And so it's really hard because of how they battled back after. And so I hate that aspect of it, but I do kind of agree with Notre Dame being in it. As much as I hate to agree to that, the thing that I hate the most is auto bids. I don't think any conference, any team should really have an auto bid, especially when we're talking about one team that you guys didn't bring up that I think would be my auto bid for the group of 5 right now would be JMU. I think that they seem to be kind of the best team out there right now, with their only loss being really a tough one against Louisville when Louisville was on a hot streak as well. So I take that into some consideration as well. I think JMU, but the fact that we're talking about JMU, Tulane, and North Texas as being playoff contenders over some of these ACC teams that we're talking about, or even BYU and Texas Tech both getting in regardless of what happens in the Big 12 championship game, or even Utah. I think you look at a lot of different teams, depending on what USC does this weekend against Oregon. I don't know. I think there's a lot of teams that we could be having a lot better discussion of competition if we didn't have these auto bids. That's my main kind of argument against how the committee does these rankings. But ultimately, I think you're just seeing a lot of what we will probably see towards the end of the season. I think you kind of alluded both of you really alluded to it for the most part, is that there's the way that the committee has it ranked right now with Notre Dame at number 9, and you see Ohio State at number 1, IU at number 2. The way that everything's lined up right now, it's pretty much the committee telling you we're not really going to change our minds. So this is kind of what it's going to be at. I guess in terms of the SEC, you really had Oklahoma's win over Alabama and then Georgia beating Texas. Those were the two biggest moves I felt in the SEC to really kind of shake things up, or for Georgia's sake to kind of cement them into the college football playoff, which probably should be just that way. But I guess kind of going away from the playoff rankings right now, anything else kind of outside of the playoffs, or anything you guys think can kind of shake things up here in the playoffs?
Tucker, do you have anything?
Yeah, there's a couple different things that could happen. Maybe this Georgia Tech game is interesting here in the future because you've got a Georgia Tech team, like I alluded to earlier, is maybe the best team in the ACC right now. They've been playing hard all season, and you know that they are in a position where they can get to the college football playoff if they just win this week and then get a win in the ACC championship. Now, Georgia, I think it would impact seeding more than anything. I think you would probably be able to keep them in if they were to lose that game. Would they get an auto bye? I don't know, because we'll see what the committee says with Texas Tech if Texas Tech is to win out. I guess the other one, and I'm sure we'll talk about it here next week, but that Iron Bowl has suddenly gotten very interesting because you've got an Alabama team that is playing for both a spot in the SEC championship and they are trying to get into the college football playoff at this point. And you got an Auburn team that's playing with bowl eligibility hopes on the line. And we've seen some kinky things happen down there on the plains when Alabama has gone down there recently. So that one has gotten a lot more interesting. I guess to a lesser degree, you get that in the Egg Bowl this time around, but with that being played in broad daylight, and then also Ole Miss just having an inside track right now, it'd only be a second loss for them, not a third like it would be for Alabama if they were to lose. So, outside of the SEC, I don't really think there are a ton of other dominoes that need to fall. Maybe the Big 12 championship is a separate issue that we discuss later once the bracket gets revealed. But Big 10 is pretty set, in my opinion, and then ACC is just going to be the one team out of the ACC.
Yeah, I feel like the Big Ten really doesn't have any way that it really could get shaken up unless some kind of miracle were to happen where I think Rutgers this weekend upsets Ohio State. I don't see that happening.
Yeah, I mean, outside of the SEC, the most interesting thing by far is if somehow the ACC and Big 12 could position multiple teams to get into this. I think that's going to be tough. The ACC, oddly, even with where they are in the rankings, might have a better shot just because of Miami having that head-to-head over Notre Dame. Like, if the Canes finish 10-2, and you've got that win, and I know we were talking about Notre Dame a second ago, and both Tucker and I left them out. And as I'm doing that, I'm just like, I mean, that is clearly one of the 12 best teams in the country, and I don't buy the committee when they say 12 best teams. That's very clearly not. And look, I'm not even as someone who, I know you were discussing the auto bids. I actually don't hate the auto bids. I don't mind it. But I see it both ways. But from a Notre Dame standpoint, that feels like a team that's so hard to leave out of this thing with the way they've played over the course of the season, that if you leave them out and you also have Miami sitting there at 10-2 who beat them head to head, it feels hard to leave the Canes out. So I wonder if you do see someone else fall out of this thing that a lot of us are kind of assuming as an inside track at this point. And the Big 12, it may be tough because I just think at this point, you're looking at almost a guarantee the runner-up of that conference is going to be a 3-loss team, and I don't think there's going to be a 2-loss in that league with a strong enough resume to get into this. I will say, and I know we're going to get into the coaching search stuff, Ole Miss is fascinating, and I'm not even talking about this from a Mississippi State, rivalry standpoint. I heard an interesting point brought up today by a guy who covers the Rebels very closely, in that does the situation there with Kiffin, if they were to take a loss in the Egg Bowl, and I don't, spoiler, I don't think State's winning that football game. But if that were to happen, could you make an argument against Ole Miss if there's uncertainty about what Kiffin's future is there? Because look, coaching is a part of it is on the sheet. That was the point. It was Neil McCready and Chase Parham both cover the Rebels for 247 Sports, and they were talking about one of the factors, and we kind of saw it with a player a few years ago in Jordan Travis for FSU. Availability, whether it be players or coaches, is considered. And I'm not, again, I know we're about to do the coaching stuff here in a sec, but that's weirdly, I think, the most interesting thing from an SEC standpoint. I mean, if Texas beats Texas A&M, what happens there? Could the Longhorns find some sort of a path back into this? Maybe if the Sooners were to drop one of their last 2 games. But it feels like we're talking about next weekend, because this weekend slate of games, I mean, look, we have the SEC SoCon Challenge going on.
Well, and you brought one up too. I mean, with Oklahoma losing one of these last 2 games, we'll talk about the Missouri game this weekend. That's one of them that I'm really starting to question these last 2 games for Oklahoma, just because of how history has painted itself in the past. But yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of things that really could get shaken up still yet down the stretch for the SEC in particular, as we're talking SEC, but really in the world of college football as a whole. So very interesting to see how everything closes out here down the stretch.